Hi, my name is Reuben. In this series of videos, I walk you through the sample Poor Doctors application that I developed for the introduction of Gennaro Mobile. In this video, I will look at what I call the list select pattern, what other people may know as zoom windows, but it involves the product underscore select.4gl and 4fd form. So in our application, where we see this pattern occurring is with the when we're entering details for a part and we want to select a product. So maintaining job lines, parts, and I'm adding a new product, adding a new line, and I come to the product field, and rather than typing in a product code or selecting from a drop-down list, what I have is a window that pops up with a list of values. I can change to display the description, so more appropriate for a part, then selecting the part, and then that gets returned back to my calling program. So that pattern there is what I call what we call a list select or a zoom window, where it's basically listing a number of records from a database table and then allowing the user to select one which is passed back into the calling program. So you'd use that instead of a combo box. Typically we've got more than a screen full of values you can select from. So say more than 20 values, you're going to want to select it from a list rather than perhaps from a combo box which you use for smaller values. Okay, so let's look at that code that's behind that. So in our job detail grid, which was where we were importing there's our input statement, we were importing the details for a job detail record. We had an on action zoom in the product field, and that, if we look at the form as well, we'll see that the product field there is a button edit, and one of the properties in there is action. If I can find it. And the action I've mapped to is the zoom action. So in the 4GL code, we have our on action zoom when we're in the product code field, and that's where we go off and call our product list select. Now I put this little expression here using NVL, which basically says if we return a value, then this is going to be not null, and that's the value we're going to use. Otherwise, if we return null, then we want to set the value back to the function that was there to begin with. And I set the field touch to true to indicate that we've actually touched that field and changed it. That becomes useful when we in the cancel when we want to see if we've actually touched any fields. Okay, so the product underscore list dot select, that's the function that goes and displays the list of products and allows the user to select one. So go down to product underscore list 4GL, and this, if we look at it, it's very close to some of the other list 4GLs we've had, except instead of being the initial function wasn't called select. I forget what it was, a view or list in those other ones, but here I've called the function select, and it follows the same pattern. We're opening a window, populating an array from the database, then populating the user interface array, and then we're doing our list. But the difference with the list is this time we're returning a value. In this instance, a product code, and our function returns the product code to the calling program. The other thing that's distinct about this function is inside our display array. So you'll notice I don't have, or the double click action is mapped to accept. So we're saying we're selecting a row from the array, the accept action, and the accessory type is the check mark. So previously on our display arrays, we've seen the chevron icon. This time we're going to see a check mark. So if we look at that list, get back into it, product code, lines, so adding a row, selecting from the product. We'll see we don't have a greater than sign on the right hand side. We have this tick which indicates which row is the current row and which one I've ticked on. So that's the function of that accessory type. We want it to be a check mark, which we saw. The other thing that's distinct is in the open window, which I glossed over earlier, but the open window line, we're using the style equals dialog. So the other list windows we saw don't have that attribute style equals dialog, but this select window does. What that does is, if you note very carefully when we click on here, note the direction of the window, so it's coming up from the bottom, as opposed to these other windows where you've got that left to right transition here to indicate that we're, basically that we're doing a zoom window. We're selecting the value of you. I'm utilizing that up and down transition that's available on iOS. You won't get that on Android. It'll just open a window like a normal window. So yeah, so just recapping the select. So the standard looking form for the lists, the major, minor, image columns. The 4GL code looking very similar to our other list code. The array, the data type based on the product record, the database array, the user interface array, and populating the database array, then populating the user interface array, which is then used in a display array. The distinctions being the accessory type to get the tick rather than the chevron, and the double click mapping to the accept action. And then when we're coming out of the display array, we're looking at the current row and returning that row back to the calling program. Okay, so that's the list select as used in the product_select code.